This is absolutely becoming a pickle. I've never... the worst thing is, I've spent absolute ages working this out to bring everyone in, and it's always been fine. And now, all of a sudden... Oh, man, you can see the pain in my face, can't you? You can see the pain in my eyes. Right, all I can think of is right. If you it's working.
Damn, so at least we got something. Right, I'll get off of this now and see if Jules will connect.
Yeah, let's do a try. Cheers, pal.
All right, see you later.
I'm hoping that was the issue. Facebook kept them just coming up with random stuff. Just kept them saying something was wrong with it. It weren't working. So I don't know what went on there. That's just my bloody blooming luck, isn't it? Hopefully, if Jules requests this time, I can get him on. Oh my goodness, this ain't from my life, these things start going wrong. They start going wrong. The worst thing is me is I spent absolutely ages trying to set things up so it works perfect, and I have these little things happen. So, please come on, please. Oh yes! I'm so sorry, pal. Thank you. Hallelujah. Praise the Lord. Whew. Absolute nightmare, Jules. Thank you. And patience. I'm going to set it
up. I was just expecting it not to work. So here we go. There we go.
Oh, there goodness. Oh, thank you. That was absolutely polite. Did you see the worry on my face? And I was trying to load it all in. I've been planning this for ages, pal. So thank you, thank you.
Yeah, your picture's pretty blurry. I think it was your signal.
Is it
My
blurring out?
Really crisp. Yours is quite.
Ah, so mine looks crisp. Chris, can you see me all right, Chris? I'll tell you something. Oh, I'm going to have a heart attack. Chris, can you see me?
I can see you. I can see you. Yeah. You're not as crisp now as you were earlier, but it's fine. It's fine.
Jules, thank you again for coming on and being patient with me. I do really, really appreciate it. It means a lot, honestly. So what I was saying about people, about what I like about you, Jules, which is different from a lot of other people, a lot of other carp anglers I know. I class carp anglers as, so you get a good carp angler or a good fisherman. They can tie good rigs and they catch big fish. But what makes a great angler in my world is someone who's got time for other anglers. And I've watched a lot of your podcasts, a lot of your feeds, and you're very humble. And you're one of the only people that will regularly reply to questions asked on your Instagram, questions asked on your Facebook. You don't expect nothing off nobody, which is rare. Because I tell you, I spoke to so many people recently, Jules, and they ain't got the time for you, you know. And to have someone that's got your ethos and your attitude towards other anglers is a big thing in my world. So thank you for coming on. Cool. I'm going to ask you a few questions. I won't be too much. So yeah, so we do this as a bit of an educational feed. So I like to try and inspire new anglers, new carp anglers, and we do all aspects. So just for the people at Lads Home, I know obviously you're an author of books. You've done obviously a short session carp fishing. Obviously you wrote articles for Carp World. So 30 years plus in the industry.
I've written 6 books. 6?
Well, that says it all, doesn't it? 6 books, a world of knowledge, and humble as they come.
Yeah.
So what was so? It's sort of like a 3-part question, really, Jules. What got you into carp fishing? And what's your inspiration to doing it? And so, what do you get out of it? And for me, I enjoy the peace and quiet to gather my thoughts. And it's sort of this day and age with all mental health and mental well-being. Fishing brings a lot to the table. So what would you say, in your own words, angling means and is brought to you?
Well, I started fishing in 1976 just by bumping into somebody at a lake. I'd got no interest, didn't know anybody who fished. I was always been a country person. I started fishing in 76, then match fishing, then specialist fishing. I caught carp by accident, not big carp, but they were just another species. So if you catch a 18-pound pike and you catch a 9-pound carp, a 9-pound carp wasn't over impressive to me. I had, piked nearly 20 pounds when I was, so I'd be about 17, 18. But I caught my first double in 82, 83. And it just really impressed me. So that's when I started carp fishing. But they were just another species to me until I discovered the herring in 84. And all of a sudden, I didn't need to for 24 hours, just striking at twitches. And so carp fishing for me began in 84 when I first used the hair rig. What does it give to me? It's just one of those things, isn't it? My dad loved cricket and I don't get it. I love Formula I love Formula One and my dad doesn't get it. So carp fish, it was just something I get. It's just something I like. It gives me relaxation. It challenges my brain. It's down to me. Don't matter how much money you've got, how fat, how thin you are, how rich. It's down to you outwitting the carp. So to me, it's a solitary pursuit. Although obviously through Facebook you become a knowledge. So, but I just find it very well, no, I don't find it relaxing because you can't relax because you're always working hard at it. But I find it relaxing of spiritually and mentally. It's not relaxing doing it, but I actually feel at one when I do it.
Yeah, and you're outside, you're in nature, you're enjoying the environment, and like I say, with angling, for me, it's something about it. It's a bit of a competition because I'm an all-round angler. I'm not just a carp angler. I love carp fishing. I love roach fishing.
Remember to keep asking me the questions. You're asking me the questions.
But I don't want to bombard you too much, Jules. Sorry, pal. Yeah. So, because we do a lot of things for new carp anglers, okay, and what would you say for a new carp angler? Because at the moment, when you go on social media, I think personally, you get blown away with 1,001 rigs, 1,001 leads. You have to have this up, you have to have that up. You've got a fishy. For basic terms of carp angling, what would you say to a new angler? What they would need, like just basic hair rig?
No. You need to find a water that's full of carp. That's your first thing. Don't matter how good you are as a carp angler, until you find a water full of carp. Because the only way to learn about carp fishing is to catch carp. And the only way to catch carp is to fish a water full of carp. So you need to find water which holds loads of carp between 8 and 20 pounds. Because if you can catch a 9 pound, you can catch a 12. If you catch a 12, you can catch a 16. So you need to find, the first thing is water. Until you find a water full of carp, it doesn't matter how sharp your hooks are, how good your bait is, how long your rods are. So the first thing is find a water where people are catching carp. Not where they're supposed to be carp, but where you are actually seeing lots of carp being caught. That's the first thing. That's beyond. And just, if you're a new angler, just duplicate what successful people are doing. That's what I did. Nobody becomes good at carp fishing overnight. You need to see who's catching and who isn't catching. So the right water and copying other people.
So surround yourself with good anglers. Go fishing regularly.
Well, yeah, you need to observe other people, and you can learn as much from people who aren't catching as you can from people who are catching. So if somebody casts out once a day and he's getting the only bite of the day, and somebody's thrashing the water to a foam and not getting any, then that tells you something. If somebody has half a dozen casts to get it right next to the island, catches, and somebody just chucks it near and doesn't catch, you can learn as much from people who are not catching as people who are catching. So I never ever put other people's success down to luck. I always watch what they're doing. So if they chuck out and they're maybe a rod length off the mark and are catching fish, it may be that the fish are not tight against the tree anymore. They're at the bottom of the slope. So you've observation of what other people are doing. You can learn just as much from the ones who are not catching as the ones who are catching.
Sometimes it's sensible just to sit back and watch. Sometimes watch the other anglers, watch the water, and obviously don't always go by what's in books. Just go down to the venue and sit and watch.
Yeah.
Definitely. So what about baiting? I mean, how do you bait? Would you recommend best way to bait? I know it's different at different waters, but what's your preferred method yourself, Jules?
At this time of year, you're fishing for a bite. I mean, I've been to the water today. Now, people don't really understand carp. Before Christmas, the water temperature was 12 degrees, 11 to 12 degrees. The water temperature when the thaw ended, which was about 5 days ago, sorry, when the thaw started, was 3.1. Today, the water temperature was 3.6. That's all it is. Those carp don't go, it's mild, we're going to start feeding. Those carp are all laid up in the reeds. So at this time of year, you're fishing for a bite. Those carp are not, there'll be one or two waters where they might be feeding strongly, but the majority of carp are just picking at things. So at this time of year, you're just fishing single baits, maybe a little single pop-up, small PVA bag. You are fishing for one bite at a time. A tiny PVA bag, size of a baby tomato, smaller than a golf ball. So at this time of year, you're fishing for bites. You're not firing 30, 50 boilies out. You're not spomming, because all you're doing is just wasting time. Those carp, until you see carp head and shouldering all over, forget it. You're fishing for bites at this time of year. Bright pinks, yellows, whites, oranges, anything like that. It's visual.
And are you good to go to probably, I suppose, you go shallow venues as opposed to deeper venues?
Well, at this time of year, I'm going wherever I can within 5 or 10 miles. But I'm expecting the carp at this time of year to be. They don't like the cold. They don't like the cold water, the cold wind on the backs. So you want areas that are sheltered. You want the areas that get the most sun. So if you wake up in the morning, just imagine which way the sun comes round. Any areas that get the most sun are the areas that will warm up first. And as long as there's not a cold wind blowing in there, that's where they are. Reeds, they'll use reeds at this time of year to rub the leeches off themselves. Areas of reeds will be half a degree warmer, and the carp will lay up in those reeds because they're the last places to freeze up, and they'll use the reeds to get the leeches off themselves. So you want areas that get the most sun, the reeds underneath snags. They won't be not often in open areas.
Yeah, so minimal, a little bit of feeding. So what sort of methods do you like? Are you a chod man? Are you a distance caster?
It depends, doesn't it? You don't want to be casting around too, but I use a 2-ounce lead, and as long as I can feel it hit the bottom, I just use a pop-up rig with a piece of foam. And when the foam pops up to the surface, you know that the hook is then going to settle down. So yeah, chods are good, but I just use a multi-rig. That's what I use, because I know that when the foam pops up on the surface, that is directly above my hook bait, so I know whether I'm tight enough to the reeds. Whereas when you cast at the reeds, you think you're really close, but you only know how close you are when that bit of foam pops up, and it'll show that you're 2 foot away or too close. So yeah, just single baits. I might use a PVA bag, but that's it. I'll put no free offings out this time of year.
Just for the one bite. That's all you're going for at the end of the day.
One bite, yeah. When you get one bite, you can get 2 or 3. Carp will be in shoals of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Today, when we went out on the boat doing the bailiffing work, there was shoals of 4 or 5 fish all in the reeds together. They weren't single. In the summer, they'll swim around singly, but in winter, they'll shoal up. So if you can catch one, you can catch 2 or 3. Because
they're all huddled up together, obviously, for warmth and whatnot. So I follow your page. Yes, I mean I follow your page, your angling page on Facebook. You seem to be doing really well all the time. Like every time I go on there, you've caught something, your rods are up. But I mean, that's because you're on the bank. You can't. Like, I think I messaged you or questioned you on one of the live feeds asking, would you fish an icy water? And I think your reply was, well, you can't catch them at home, which is 100%. I suppose a lot of people they get a bit they won't go out in the cold. They'll stay at home where it's warm, and they won't get out in the colder months to catch the carp, which obviously you need to do. So, also, Julian, what's your views on hooks? You have a specific pan. I know one of your sayings is you never catch less carp on a sharp hook. I love that saying. I've quoted you in it a few times. What is your view on hand sharpened hooks, out of packet hooks, and things like that, Jules?
Well, a hook out the pocket will feel sharp, because when you feel the hook, you're feeling the tip of it. So the tip of it will always feel sharp. It'll always feel sharp. The thing about hand sharpened hooks is you're thinning them down. So instead of them looking like that, you're thinning them down. And so if you imagine the difference between a disgorger and a baiting needle, they've both got a point on them. And even if you sharpen the tip of a disgorger, because of the thickness of the disgorger, it wouldn't go into your flesh. So all that a hand sharpened hook is doing, I don't like the term sharpened, I call it thinned. So the same amount of pressure will push a sharpened hook in probably half an inch. The same amount of pressure on a hook out the packet will just touch the lip. That's all it is. You're finding the point down. On many waters, it won't make a difference. It might not make a difference. But carp, certainly this time of year, are a little bit more lethargic, and you really, you want that hook to go in and panic them. So it baffles me that people will spend £200 on a rod, but they won't spend £9 on a packet of hooks that's sharpened in comparison to 6 that aren't. I just find that'd be like Lewis Hamilton having the best car in the world, and then saying, do you know what, we're a bit tight for money this month, but we'll use remolds. Your car is only as good as the tread. So your car is only as good as the tread. Your fishing is only as good as your point of contact. And the point of contact is your hook. Your hook is your tire. So your fishing is only as good as your hook, because that's the contact point.
You explain, I don't know much about sharpened hooks, to be fair, but you explain that. But it makes sense because you've got the actual diameter of the hook, of the shaft, haven't you? That's what's going to cause the friction. So by reducing the actual diameter of the hook, it's allowing it to slide on smoother. So yeah, that makes a lot more sense to me just by talking about it like that.
Yeah, if you get a normal hook and a PVA nugget, you can literally, you have to pull the hook into the nugget. But when you have a PVA nugget and a sharpened hook, it literally sinks into it. It is, and that's what the carp's flesh it does. Once that carp touches a sharpened hook, it's into the flesh. And once it's in the flesh, that's when the carp panics.
Yeah, because it's just going to go in smoother. It's going to be like going into a piece of butter, isn't it? As opposed to having that bit of resistance.
Yeah.
So Jules, so another little thing I'd like to just touch topic on is, I've written a few notes down, pal. Social media. What are you? I mean, so there's a lot of young. I get quite a lot of people messaging me and asking me because I mean I don't know it all. I'm just honest. I'm an honest guy. I don't know it all, and I'm just very honest and open-hearted. So I get a lot of, what advice would you say to these young lads that want to be sponsored? Because you get a lot of young lads now always, I want to be sponsored. What have I got to do? Have you got any advice for them on the route they should go down, or?
Well, but the problem is that nowadays, if you want to be sponsored, everybody wants to be sponsored, and you've got to stand out from the crowd. Now it's called the fishing business. It's not called the fishing. So in order to be sponsored, you need to give a company something to persuade other people to purchase the products. Now, if I see Chris Boardman or somebody on a push bike, I'll take notice of that because of I know that he wins races, etc., etc. But if I see Joe Bloggs on the push bike, that's not going to make me buy that push bike.
No.
So the thing about being sponsored is you are only going to be sponsored when you catch lots of carp and you're seen as a reputable angler. So forget about being sponsored within a year. It's not going to happen. If you want to be sponsored, you need to catch lots of carp and you need to really attach yourself to one firm. There's no point catching loads of carp on mainline baits and then asking Nash to sponsor you, or catching loads of carp on Nash terminal tackle and then saying to Fox, would you sponsor me? So you've really got to decide what products you want to use, spend a year catching fish, be proactive on social media, be very positive, and then look at, you know, getting attention. But you're not going to get sponsored nowadays as a new angler by a reputable company in less than a year. Don't care who you are, because everybody has got an outlook, which is social media. In the olden days, if you caught carp and you were in Angling Times, Anglers Mail, Carp Talk, then people started to notice you. Nowadays, you get noticed very easily, but so do 3.7 million other people.
So there's loads of people. Everyone's doing it. So
forget about, people have no idea about sponsorship. It's not football where we're all on 50 grand a week. There are probably less than 20 anglers who get paid as sponsors. It just doesn't exist. It's why would a bait company pay you? I always say to people, if you want to be sponsored, tell me why I should sponsor you over somebody else. What have you got that is going to make me choose you over somebody else?
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, you don't, I notice you don't get many like lads writing articles anymore, like little social media. They just do like £15 carp, caught on this, caught on that, hashtag. They don't actually do an in-depth write-up anymore. If you know, so they just seem to sort of just bombard you with saying pictures. They'll catch like 20 carp out of a runs water, and then they'll put looking for sponsors. You know, they seem to.
They won't get anybody. They won't get anybody. It's just pointless. So I would say there's nothing wrong with wanting to be sponsored, but you've got to be realistic. You know, if your ethos is to be sponsored, you won't be in carp fishing very long. If your ethos is to go fishing and enjoy it and eventually get some support, then it might happen. But forget about that. Just all you need to concentrate is catching carp and enjoying it. You know, because if you don't enjoy it, you soon give it up.
Exactly that. So that's what I say. I see a lot of lads doing that at the moment. They're all pressurised to be sponsored, and you try and help them, but some people just don't listen. And I also try and say to people, social media is massive. So if you're rude on a piece of social media, or you're abusive to someone, or you're arrogant to someone, people notice. So I know a few lads, lovely lads, great anglers, good kids, but their social media is a bit abusive. They just don't listen to you, do they? They don't realise everyone sees everything. I mean, I've had pictures pulled off me from God knows when. None
of your big companies are going to take you on. They're not going to take you on. The chances of you being taken on by Nash, Fox, Corda, Daiwa, Shimano, Sticky are, you're not going to be taken on in under 3 years. No chance. Forget it.
It's not an apprenticeship. You know, but I say, I get all the time people saying, oh, what I do, I just like to spread a bit. I try to bring community.
Questions?
Yeah. Sorry, Joe. I talk a lot. So another little question I think people get confused about is a PB, personal best. So what's a PB to you? Is it the biggest carp that you've caught, or is it a special looking carp, or what would you say in your eyes defines a PB?
A personal best is acknowledged as being your biggest weight. That's if somebody says I've had a PB, it has to be weight. You could say having a PB river fish or a PB from this low water, but it's always got to be weight. If you're classing it as a personal best, a favourite fish or the one I wanted to catch is different. I mean, my PB is 49.6, but it's just a fish. So it's whatever floats your boat. It's doesn't matter really. It's just a weight. Okay, so since I'm firing questions here, I'm going to go off schedule and just fire you loads of questions. Now you're comfortable with that, yeah? So what about cooking? What are you like for? Are you a chef on the bank? Are you a pot noodle kind of guy, or are you a full-on sort of like? No, I'm not. On the bank, I've always fished better as a hungry angler. So I'll take coffee and tea and water, and I think they're more like pasta pots, sober or something. I can't but they're really nice. And I'll take the little potato pots in winter as well. You just add a bit of hot water, and they're really hot. So for short sessions, I'm only fishing probably somewhere between 3 and 12 hours in winter. I'll just take a pasta pot and a potato pot, and I might have a couple of biscuits. But if you eat loads of food on the bank and feel lethargic, you'll doze in the chair, you won't be watching the fishing. So less is more. I'd rather feel hungry and be observant than full and lethargic.
Yeah. And I suppose if you're not like, you'll walk around the water and you'll move, swim quite regularly, you'll be less likely to sit down and almost just sit in your chair and not move.
Yeah. Keep mobile.
Yeah. So I've been looking. So what's your personal most memorable moment in angling? So I've been listening to a lot of your podcasts and a lot of with the other guys. So what was your most memorable moment?
Well, I mean, catching the decade at 49.6 was a memorable fish catching moment, but being, there's, as in memorable in relation to fishing, I suppose, being made a life member of the Carp Society, being inducted into the Carp Fishing Hall of Fame.
Yeah, well, wow.
Releasing my first book. They're all more memorable in the big scheme of things. But I suppose first double, first 20, as fish, they're more memorable. But, they're memories. It's tomorrow, isn't it, that you're living for? You're living to make memories rather than remember them.
No, definitely. Because I was listening to a podcast recently with one of the chaps, and about a picture you had a nice big carp in some tidy whities, and he was they were calling you like a Chippendale of angling.
Oh, well, that was in 1994 when I went floater fishing with Andy Little at Willow Park, and it was absolutely red hot. And I actually got a pair of shorts on, but when he took the picture, you could just about see the shorts. And Angling Times had used that picture, and one of the local papers had picked it up, and then the Daily Star picked it up, and it appeared in page when the Daily Star used to have the page 7 fella, and they put the fish and Chippendale. So yeah, that was the one. Yeah, that was the one. Yeah. That was a long time ago, mate. That's 27 years ago.
Yeah. So I've got a few questions popping up. I've got one from Chris O'Deany. Warm weather, when leathering, how often would you leave out from casting with no bite, even if fish are showing? So how long would you leave your lead out in the water, even if you saw a carp jumping around? Would you cast over, or would you just stay put?
In the summer months, carp are more mobile. But if you put yourself where the carp are, and you're satisfied that it went down with a thump and it's not tangled, you're satisfied the foam's popped up, and you've not had any bleeps, I wouldn't move it if I'm on fish. But if I'm on fish, then for an hour later they're all showing somewhere else, I'd move. The only time I recast if I'm on fish, if I get a single bleep, a beep, and maybe the line lifts, I won't leave it long. I'll probably recast. I think even with the sharpened hooks, you can sometimes get done by a fish. When you get a single bleep, to me, I've been done. So in the summer months, if I'm on them, it's dropped correctly, the foam's popped up, and there's still fish there, I won't move it. But if I'm seeing fish elsewhere and I've had a single bleep, I'll definitely move it.
Brilliant. So Neil wants to know, Neil Glarland, what is your go-to rig, general? So if you had to choose one rig forevermore, what would it be?
Multi-rig. I use a lead click and a multi-rig. The only reason I use a multi-rig is that I have the hook point. It's pop-up rig. The hook point is just off the bottom. Carp are not like roach and eels. So if you imagine how big a carp is, it can't tell when that multi-rig is just off the bottom, because your hook point is literally 3 to 5 millimeters off the bottom. That carp doesn't know that hook is that hook bait is not the bottom. So it's always a multi-rig. Anybody who looks at any of my stuff will see a multi-rig. So I've caught thousands, and I mean thousands of carp on the multi-rig in the last 14 years. Carp don't read books. They don't know what a rig is. All they can see is there's a food item they want. The hook is clear at the bottom. When they sucks it in, it goes in its lip. It works all the time. Hook bait, always a multi-rig.
Okay, so and also one other guys asked, what would you do? Watch out for. So if you approaching a new water, I think we sort of covered this already. If you just turn up at a new water, what's the first thing you do?
Well, you should never turn up at new water without having done any research. So when you turn up at new water, you should know the stock of fish, perhaps where they've been coming out from recently, you know, the tactics that work. So even, I don't care who you are as a carp angler, Terry and Dave Lane, me, anybody, we never turn up at water and go, I wonder what this is like. You've always done research. So your research, you want to be first there. So if it's a day ticket water, you want to be first in the queue. At this time of year, you want to be looking for features. But any other time of year, I'd be looking for fish showing. So I'll be fishing off the barrow. I'll be looking for a warm wind in the summer. I'll be looking to fish behind the wind in the winter. So I'd be mobile. Most people aren't mobile. They pick a swim and stay in it. So I would fish off the barrow. If I saw a fish, I'd move on it.
So in regards, are you like do you pre-bait a lot, Jules, or do you pre-bait a swim beforehand, or you're not a fan of that?
It depends. If you're fishing one water regularly, then the more bait the carp find for free, the more likely they are to have it again. But on most waters, there's so much bait going in all over the place, it doesn't really make any difference. So to your average angler, I would say, if you're fishing one water regularly, find out what bait goes in most often and use that bait. Because if you think about it, if somebody fishes a water that I fish, and I don't have me, but I use scope bait squid, every time I go fishing, I'm baiting up for everybody else, which don't bother me. So when the carp swims round, it doesn't think, well, that's Julian's scope bait squid, that's Adam's scope bait squid. That carp is just eating my bait. So if I was a new angler and I went to a water which was doing well on mainline cell, everybody's baiting up for me. So my advice is, you don't need to spend money on pre-baits if it's a water that other people are fishing. If it's a water only you're fishing, then that's a good idea to bait certain spots. But for the majority of people who watch this, just use whatever bait people are using, because they're baiting up for you.
I mean, and also, Jules, are you a fan of canal carping? Do you fish many canals at all?
I have caught them from canals and caught them from recently, but you're making it hard on yourself, because at least in a lake, you know, there's somewhere within 1, 2, 3, 10 acres. In a canal, they could be a long, long way away. So canal is about location. If you can find them on a canal, they're very catchable.
One of the chaps online has asked, Jules, have you ever been catfishing or sturgeon fishing?
I haven't been catfishing as such, but I have caught catfish when I've been carp fishing. I've had cats to 54 pounds when I've been carp fishing.
That's really good.
That's a big catfish. They are an impressive creature, but one a year is enough.
Yeah, well, yeah. I've never caught one. I don't know if I'd want to catch one, to be honest. They're not my sort of thing. Ian Vickers asked, what's your tactics on a weedy venue?
Closer is better. So on a weedy venue, the closer you fish, the easier it is to land them. So for weedy venues, the first thing is, people say, oh, look for holes in the weed. Well, that's a load of rubbish. It's like, the first thing you need to do is find out where the carp are. Once you can find out where the carp are, then you decide where to fish. You don't look for holes in the weed, because the carp might not be in those holes in the weed. So my advice is, find out where the fish are, find out how close they come to. The heaviest I use 20-pound mainline, size 4 hooks, drop off leads, closer is better. So I'm fishing, you know, single rods, little holes, the closer in the better. People fish far too far out in the weed. They get a bite and then they've got to bring it through three weed beds. So weed is heavy line, strong hooks, you're fishing for a bite, closer is better than further.
And also, Jules, another thing that's quite common is silt fishing. I mean, a lot of people talk about this, and you know, how do you tackle a real silty lake or silty water?
Most waters have silt on the bottom. Unless it's a rock hard clay bottom or a gravel bar, it's going to have silt on it. If you're fishing in silt, you need to fish a helicopter rig or bomb on the end of the line rig or chod rig, whatever you want to call it, because the lead will go into the silt and your hook length will ride back. Not a lot of waters I fish have bad silt, because in really deep silt, the carp won't feed in it anyway. But you need to avoid, if your hook bait's coming back smelly and black, I wouldn't be fishing there. I'm feeling for a drop. If I can feel a drop, if you can put the hook bait, if the lead will go there, the carp will go there. So if you're fishing in silt and you know it's silt, then a helicopter rig. And the best way to test how deep the silt is, to cast out in the silt with some wool. So you tie some wool from the lead, you know, say 10 inches up your line, and you leave it there for maybe 10 minutes, wind back, and however deep the silt is will have stained the wool.
Oh, I've never heard that before. That's a great little. I'll be doing that. My lake's silty as hell, so I struggle there. Another look. So, how do you? Are you a marker rod guy, a distance stick kind of guy, or do you use electrical tape, or how do you mark up your line when you're fishing distance?
Depends what distance is. If I'm fishing over 100 yards, I'll use obviously the wrapping sticks. But most people fish far too far out. You should fish where the carp are, not further out than everybody else, unless the carp are there. Anything up to 100 yards, I've got a sight line, I've written on a piece of paper, I'm casting out, I'm dropping it on the spot, I'm putting in a clip, and I'm putting a bit of marker tape. So I use marker tape, electrical tape from Wilkinson's, and a sight line. All this, I see people wrapping at 15 yards. It's like, it's crazy. You know, just find out the mark you're fishing to, have 2 or 3 casts, get it in the clip, bit of tape on it, and it's so, you don't want to be wrapping, but I can understand for long range, but it's like having yellow straps on, or folding your angles, or having a beanie. It's more fashion than useful at times.
So, I mean, what about modern technology? Would you use a bait boat? Would you use a deeper?
Modern technology is all about what is like. So the first thing is, if they're allowed, it's not cheating. I personally don't. I personally want to use my eyes, and I personally want to use 35 years of experience to find carp. But there again, if I was 17 and I'd only been carp fishing for a year, I could understand why I'd want to use a deeper. So it's what carp fishing is to you. To me, carp fishing is outwitting the carp through my knowledge, experience. It's me against the carp. When you start using bait boats, drones, sonars, fish spies, it's almost like taking the water out the pond, looking where they all are, putting the water back, and fishing for it. Now, that's not for me, but I'm not 17, and I've got 35 years of experience that tells me where the fish are. So I tend not to fish waters which have bait boats allowed or have deepers allowed. My waters are more traditional, but I understand why people use them. You know, I do understand it. Modern technology is great, but sometimes it all becomes a question of just catching fish rather than the pursuit of fish. I enjoy the doing it just as much as I do of catching them, but I've caught thousands of carp, so it's easy for me to say that.
Yeah, it's the watercraft, isn't it? People seem to lose nowadays. So
yeah, but that's, I mean, maybe if, you know, it's the difference between a push bike and an electric bike. An electric bike will get you there, and so will a push bike, but it's how you get there. It's horses for courses. You know, Terry Hearn uses a bait boat, Dave Lane uses a fish spy. They're about catching that fish, and it's legal, so it's up to them. Doesn't bother me what other people do, it's just how I feel about it.
sure. We're going to have a little question off. I got Phil Millward. He's asked, in this day and age, is it acceptable to put a load of bait into your swim when you're about to leave?
If it's not against the rules, and if you know that somebody's not following you, I don't see that it's a problem. But if somebody is stood behind you and you're baiting up, then I think it's a bit morally indefensible. But the thing is, it depends what is a load of bait. When I leave, I might put a kilo of bait out. Now, some may say, well, you're ruining it for somebody else, whereas another bloke might come along and say, thanks for baiting up for me. I personally wouldn't put a load of bait out at this time of year, because you are ruining it not only for yourself, but for other people. So today, I probably put 2 kilos of bait out over 8 swims. So each swim got 2 handfuls of bait. So that was really just wherever I go, there'll be a little bit of bait. But I think if you're turning up and putting out 20 kilos of bait and not coming back for a week, and you know somebody else is dropping in, I think that's it's a bit selfish. It's not, it's like bait boats, isn't it? If it's not against the rules, it's okay. But, you know, you have to, why would you do it? You know, why would you do it?
I don't know. Some people's mentality. Just, I mean, I personally wouldn't throw it all in. I'd probably just take it home and save for next session. So it doesn't.
For coming back the next day, I have no problem doing that. But I wouldn't put 15 kilos out in February 4 times a week, because you're ruining it for everybody else.
So, top class says, I'm checking out any other questions for Jules that pop up. I'm just checking the screen, Jules, they pop up in front of me in case I see anything. What's your view on lead? So, it's a weird one. So, I don't know if you've heard of the stone leads, and then you've got the normal lead clip leads, and then they need the stones. Now, have you any experience of them, or if they work, or?
Yeah, I mean, morally, it's like going fishing, isn't it? Once you start, it's all down to your own moral conscience. You know, if you're worried about sticking hooks in carp, we really shouldn't be going carp fishing. And I understand, you know, some people say if you're dropping the lead, really, should you be dropping the lead? You should be dropping a stone. But then it's all horses for courses, isn't it? It's like you walk across your garden, you kill all the bugs, you eat venison, you wear a fur coat, you buy clothes from China that have been made in a sweatshop. It's horses for courses. I'm quite happy to drop the lead in thick weed, and I don't worry. I don't tell people to drop the lead other than to protect the carp. So I understand, yeah, these stones are, you know, probably morally more safe than leads. But you start getting into discussions then about sticking hooks in carp, putting fuel in your car, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah. It just goes on forever. So it's like lead core. Are you a fan of lead core, or?
I'm not a fan of lead core. I prefer lead free. I prefer the heavy braid. I use the Klingon leaders. The problem with lead core is that it can kink, and if it kinks, it can be terrible for getting looped round tree stems and things like that. I don't think there's a need for lead core anymore. In the olden days, when tubing floated and it was crap, lead core was great. Nowadays, the lead-free stuff like Klingon, and most companies do lead-free stuff, and it sinks like a stone. That 65-pound Nash Klingon, you drop it at the edge, turn your back, and it just, I don't see why you use lead core.
It's not needed. It's not needed anymore, is it, really, to be fair? It's not really needed, not the tungsten tubing. A question for Phil Matt. Even if you couldn't use a boilie again, Jules, what would your next go-to bait be?
If it had to be all year round, it would have to be maggots. But if I got a choice of a couple of baits, but not boilies, it would be tiger nuts, maggots, and sweet corn. All those 3. I'd be happy not to use boilies again and fish over tiger nuts, hemp, and tiger nuts, sweet corn, and maggots. Those 3.
But also, another question.
Yeah.
It's just I was going to read a question actually. I have a little question here from Lewis Kennedy. Your views on barbed, micro barbed, because at the moment everywhere is barbless.
In the olden days, barbed hooks were not barbaric. They were what they were, and barbs were big. I think that the majority of hooks nowadays are micro barbed, which is a tiny barb. Now, if the problem with barbless hooks is they do move about, you know, and they can move about in a fish's mouth. Now, the problem is, if you fish safe rigs, which is 20-pound mainline, dropping the lead, sitting next to your rods, playing the fish firmly, you won't lose the fish. But on a lot of day ticket waters, you're looking at inexperienced anglers who are using £8 mainline and are cracking off. The thing about barbless hooks is a barbless hook is more likely to fall out. And I can quite understand why day ticket waters are barbless, because you're dealing with the idiot factor. And I understand why people order barbless hooks. Ideally, a micro barbed hook doesn't move about as much. And if I have to go barbless, if I get away with it, I just crush the barb so it's a bump, so it tends not to move about. If the rules are barbless, it's barbless. If I ran a day ticket water, it would be barbless. If I run syndicates with people I know, micro barbed is fine.
Yeah, if you feel safer. You feel safer. Another question that keeps popping up, Jules, is double check on it. What is your favourite venue to fish in the UK? A few people keep asking that.
Favourite venue I've ever fished was Savay, and that's only because it was like the water I read up. So people who were a bit older than me always read about Redmire Pool, so that was their Wembley, for want of a better word. The era I grew up was Rod Hutchinson, Kevin Maddox, people like that. So I read about Savay. So when I went to Savay, it was my Wembley, you know, or playing at Wembley Stadium. If you're a footballer, playing at Wembley, or you know, whatever, what's the Barcelona state? You know, it's like playing there. So my favourite ever water, because of his historic place, was Savay. But my favourite water in reality was a place called Drax, because Drax is the first place I ever saw a fish being caught, and that's where I fished Drax from 76 to about 86. So I learnt my perch fishing, match fishing, specimen fishing, pike fishing, carp fishing. So that's where I grew up. But you know, traditionally it would be Savay Lake.
So you actually used to do match? Did you do match fishing back in the day, then, Jules? Did you? And do you believe you should progress up?
I started. Do I think you should progress? No. It's like saying, when as a kid, you had a push bike, then you had a moped, 50cc, then you had a 125, then you had a 250, and then you had to decide whether you could afford a crap car. Nowadays, people go from push bike, dad, car. We can't go back. You can't push the genie back in the bottle. You can't expect kids to look at roach that big and go, wow, I want to catch 10 of them. Then I want to catch one that big. And then I want to catch a tench. Then I want to catch a bream. And then I want to catch a carp. You can't expect the world. That's like saying you need to have a Nokia. Then you need to have a big phone. And then eventually you can have a smartphone. Those days are gone. So match fishing for me was a natural evolution of fishing for roach, and then I was either going to be a match angler or a specialist angler. But match angling for me, it was fishing from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. on a Saturday. So it's the worst time. I didn't want to choose what swim I fished, and I was catching fish I didn't really want to catch. So I stopped match fishing. But you can't expect kids to progress as we did, and kids should progress the way of the world. So they will start. I don't think you should start by catching 30-pounders. You need to start by catching lots of carp, be they 5, 7, 9 or 11 pounds. That's a progression.
Yeah. I've had a few people asking, what age did you start angling? That's come up a couple of times.
13. 1976, I was 13. And I rode round this lake with my mates push biking, and I saw an old man sat behind two sticks, and then he lifted a stick up, and I watched him, and I watched him play this fish, and it was a tench about 4 pounds, and I just thought it was like seeing Pamela Anderson for the first time. I thought, yeah. So that I fell in love with fishing then. So that was when I was 13. So yeah, that was it.
And if there was no carp to be caught ever again, what would your next species be?
Pike. Sorry, tench and pike. Tench in the summer, pike in the winter. I mean, I'd fish for pike all year round, but it's not sporting to fish for them in the summer. So it would be tench and pike. Tench eels, Paddy.
Eels. Well, I like the old text. I'm just reading up questions. Got another guy, Chris O'Dennis, asking you, what do you remember your first ever fish?
Yeah, my first ever fish, I've got a picture of it. It's on Facebook. It was a perch, 4 ounces. It was caught on a Devon minnow. So I watched my mate Tench, I watched the old man, and the old man was in his 40s. So he was 13 years younger than I was then, as I am now, sorry. And I thought he was an old man. And he was tench fishing. I watched him for about 2 weeks on and off. And then I went to Woolworths when Woolworths existed and bought a Winfield 6-foot spinning rod, cast it out with a Devon minnow and caught a perch, 4 ounces. That was my first fish in June of 1976.
Awesome. And also, so another one is, this is quite a common one, it comes up quite a bit, slack lines or tight lines?
At range, tight lines, at short range, slack lines. But I mean, if somebody's ever read my book, Practical Carp Fishing, I wrote about this 27 years ago. My preferred method, unless I'm fishing, if I'm fishing right in the edge, slack lines. If I'm fishing at over 70, 80 yards, tight lines. What spooks carp is not the line between you and the lead. It's the line between the, it's the last 3 feet of line that spooks them. So when people talk about tight line spooking carp, well, if the last 20 feet of line on the bottom, that's only going to spook carp between you and. So my preferred, in the edge, it's slack, so it's just hanging down, not super slack, but just hanging down. I use heavy line, so it sinks through the water. At range, I'll fish it tight. I'll pull it as tight as possible and have a 60-gram bobbin, so I'm fishing for that. But anything between about, I don't know, 10 yards and 70 yards, I cast out, I'll feel the lead hit the bottom, put the bail on, take the slack, only the slack, put it in the rest and pull it in by hand until it tightens up. I then clip a bobbin on that drops to the bottom, take a bit more slack, and I have that bobbin set literally about 2 inches below the rod thing. So any movement up or down. So I used to call it the slightest touch method. So anywhere between 10 or 15 yards and 70, 80 yards, I just cast out and put the bobbin so it can go up or down at long range tight.
So a lot of lads will ask, do you use a lot of back leads in your angling or not?
Never used. The only time I use the back lead is when I'm fishing waters where there's wind surface. The problem with back leads is you create awful angles. So the carp runs off and the back leg can pick up weed and stuff like that. I would rather use a heavy line. If you use 15 or 20 pound line, it sinks like a stone. Quarter touchdown in 20 pound or Nash bullet in 20 pound. It's so heavy it sinks. You don't need a back leg. You're just making it. The only time having a back leg is in a canal or where there's wind surface.
It's getting busy. So your favourite go-to bait, all year round bait for you, Jules?
I use scopex squid all year round, but for hook bait, a bright yellow pineapple pop-up will catch most fish most of the time. I use scopex squid as my main feed, but a bright yellow pop-up.
Chris O'Denny asks, do you use mono or fluoro?
Mono. I used to use fluorocarbon when monofilament was crap. The old monofilaments had far too much stretch in them. Braided main line was banned, so I wanted something that was a bit more in control. The problem is with fluorocarbon, it's not the lack of stretch, it's the lack of impact. So you can hold fluorocarbon like that and pull and it'll never break. But when you do like that, you can bust 16-pound fluorocarbon on what I call impact. So I prefer a monofilament that has as minimal stretch as possible. Fluorocarbon is all right at range where you're not got the impact, but at range I prefer braid. I think fluorocarbon is sort of it's a bit belt and braces. It's not as good as braid, but it's more problematical than monofilament. The monofilaments of today that have little stretch are more usable.
A few of the lads have also asked, do you do much zig fishing, Jules?
No, crap. I'm crap at zig fishing. I'm good on the top and I'm good on the bottom. But fishing a bait 4 foot off the surface, a lot of my waters don't respond to it because they're either shallow, so you know, they're somewhere between 2 and 7 feet. And I've caught pop up off the lead, but it'd be totally wrong of me to say I do a lot of zig fishing.
And Sam King asked, when fishing snags, do you tighten up your clutch or to slow the fish down, or do you leave it slightly loose?
As tight as possible. I have the rod pointing at the snags, drop off lead. I have the clutch set so it can't give line. And if you notice, if people look at some of my pictures, you'll see a bank stick next to my reel handle. Because the problem is, if your clutch can't give out line easily, your rod disappears. So by putting that handle in front of putting the bank stick in front of the handle, then all the pressure it turns the carp. So I fish locked up, but I always have a bank stick in front of my handle.
That's a good tip for that. Yeah, that's a good tip to do. Another question that's come up, Jules, is what's your thoughts on retaining carp in slings for photos?
I think it's totally selfish. I got slings banged on a lot of on sacks banged on my waters in the 80s, and I think it's just egotistical. Allowing carp to recover. Well, let them recover in the landing net. When mine go in the landing net, it's not barbel in the river. You know, they go in the landing net, and for every carp that doesn't swim off strongly, oh yeah, I wanted to give it time to recover. That's a load of rubbish. It's just so you can get better pictures. I'm sorry, when you catch them, they should stay in the landing net. I mean, I have my self-timing gear set up straight away, and I'll do the picture. If you want to just go and get your mate from next door, I don't think any carp should be retained more than a couple of minutes unless it's in distress. And if it's in distress, when you put it back, it won't go anywhere. So to me, they're just ego things.
Yeah, so catch it, take your photo, put him back. There's no need to keep it slinged up for hours on end. Another question that's come up from Harry Breeze. What is your favourite rod and reel setup for close range fishing?
I've used scope. I use the scope rods now for 3 years. Scope 10 foot, 3.5 test curve, because it feels like an extension of my arm. If you think about it, if you had a 12-foot arm, it's quite ungainly. I find 10-foot rods, I can underarm cast, I can flick better. My sort of casting is one arm like that. I'm not a punch caster. So a 10-foot rod, you can flick. So it's a 10-foot scope rod, Daiwa GS 4000 reel. And they do me everything up to 100 yards. That rod just feels like I've got a 10. So when I close my eyes, it just feels like I've got a 10-foot arm. It doesn't feel like a rod. It just feels like an extension of my arm.
No, flick through. As I pop it up, I'm just trying to catch them for you, Jules. Are you a fan of commons or big mirrors? Commons or mirrors?
I've caught too many mirrors. I prefer mirrors. I've caught so many commons that it's mirrors. But I suppose if I caught loads of mirrors, I want to catch a common.
I like the patterns on mirrors that you get. Then you like a deep-bodied common as well, so it's a catch-20. Another question from Phil. Do you find that margins are more productive than open water?
Only in the summer. In the winter, the carp back off the margins unless they're reeds. I find the food disappears from the margins in the winter, and the carp will back away unless there's reeds. So summer margins, winter margins if there's reeds, but open water if there isn't.
Everyone's just saying on the feed there have been great tips you're giving people, Jules, and they're going to take it away. So everyone's been watching and reading, mate. So I'm really pleased. So if we want to slowly wrap this up for you, because we've been on your.
What time is it?
It's 8:10 now.
Yeah, I've got 5 more minutes.
Yeah, bless you. So I don't want to drag it out too long. So, George, if you've got any advice for a new angler or any inspirational quotes or something you'd say to a new angler, what would it be?
First of all, is always take responsibility. Never ever blame the weather, other anglers, your bait, your rigs, your tactics, your lack of inexperience. Once you accept that actually not catching carp is down to you, then you become a better angler. Because a lot of people I talk to, they come up with excuses. They say, well, if I fished as much as you, or if I had as much, if I fished the waters, and that's absolute crap. Once you accept that your destiny in fishing is in your own hands, you'll be a better angler. So I see people who tie rigs up on the bankside, and I think, well, you could have done that at home. I see people who tie mesh bags up at the bankside. They could have done that at home. They spend 80 quid on a puffer jacket, but they won't sharpen the hooks. They won't get they'll turn up at dinner time and wonder why they can't get the best peg. Once you accept that you becoming a better angler is in your hands, you'll become a better angler. Because the good thing about carp fishing is it's a great leveler. Now, you could give me Lewis Hamilton's car, I am never going to be anything other than 20 seconds off the pace. You can give me Valentino Rossi's motorbike. You could put me on the field with Chelsea or whoever. I'm not going to score. But if I take you carp fishing and you cast where I tell you to cast, you have a sharpened hook, a boilie, and you play that fish, that carp doesn't know you're Julian Cundiff, Terry Earn, Joe Bloggs. The carp fishing is the greatest leveler. You don't have to be gifted to be a good carp angler. Most well-known carp anglers are crap at anything else. And no, there are very few gifted. Nobody's born being a great carp angler. It's hard work. Terry Earn, Dave Lane, all of them have grafted. They didn't wake up at 27 fishing for the Burfield Common. They fished roach, bream, little carp, public waters, etc., etc. So the one thing I would say is don't blame anybody else, accept responsibility, because your ability as a carp angler is in your own hands.
So get out and do it. Don't be lazy.
Get out and do it. Yeah, absolutely.
Jules, I really appreciate you coming on, and I really appreciate the beginning. I'm sorry it took so long to get you on. It's still a bit of a malfunction. And as always, I say to everybody all the time, and I keep saying this, that there are a lot of good anglers out there. And in my personal opinion, you're a great angler because you do things like this for people like us. You've got the time for the average angler. You never ignore anyone, and that's just really admirable. Really appreciate it.
Anytime anybody asks me a question, I'll do my best.
Bless you, Jules. I'll leave you to have a nice, peaceful evening, my friend, and I'll thank you so much. Bless you, Jules.
All right, mate.
Bye,
pal.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Guys, thank you for putting up the first set. Honestly, it just would not log and load in. I don't know what went on. Always happens when you we've been practicing this. We've had loads of temporary lives, having little bits and pieces between us all. We've had a few other little live feeds, and it's been absolutely fine. So I'm really sorry we had that bit of a grief at the beginning. George is an amazing angler. He's got. If you, those that don't know him and that well, do some research on the guy. He's done, he's written so many books. He's had so much influence with angling. Follow his pages as well on Facebook. Follow him on his Insta. And I swear down to you, he's one of the only. I spoke to a lot of guys on the live video, on Messenger. I speak to lots of other guys, and by far, he's always been the most supportive and most gracious angler that I've spoke to. So, if you want inspiration, just look at his thing. Just look at his stuff. So he's a really nice guy. Again, guys, apologise. I can't help but apologise at first, but I don't know what went on. Absolute nightmare. Moving forward, if you look at the events bit at the top on Hooked on Angling Educational Feeds and Chats, we have got on Wednesday Mike and Fight Out of Cancer. We're going to be talking to him about the charity work that the organisation is doing and the things that he wants to do. Massive thank you for all your questions. It was really helpful to me. Jules knows so much. I feel like I didn't have enough questions for him. It says I should have prepped even better. Anyway, guys, we've got Rich Wilby on as well coming up. Just a few of us as introduction into cat angling. We've got talks to other people as well coming up. And again, massive love, massive thank you to everyone that put up with me on this. And I hope that some of the tips that Jules gave you will really help you. Because some of them have really opened up my eyes, especially with the hook sharpening thing. Some people just think it's a point. Julian's explained it's not just a point, it's the full shaft. Anyway, guys, God bless, stay safe, and we'll see you on Wednesday, 7 o'clock. Take care.